Relax. We're going to beat the New World Order, the global corporate crime chiefs. If you just wake up and realize the people have the power, if you stop fighting with each other along the lines of race and religion and left and right, and say, hey, I want freedom, I want the spirit of 1776 instead of your spirit of 1984, we're going to come together and we're going to beat them. Just relax in this fight. Slow motion. The enemy can't beat us. We're in slow motion. They're in regular speed. You just pick our shots. As long as we throw those punches, they're going to go down big time. This is the Sunday transmission. We got about 25 minutes left in broadcast time. And Doctor of History, Doctor of Economics, big part of my two newest films, Follow the Republic and The Obama Deception, is Dr. Webster Tarpley. Now, all these top independent scientists have gone to the original weather stations, gotten their data, and it didn't match what the UN main climate branch at East Cambria was saying out of England. That's the main science group that puts out all the propaganda. And about a week and a half ago, the emails got leaked on WikiLeaks with the documents and the computer code with computer programmer notes about this thing's a fraud, it's getting colder, here's how you manipulate the data to make it say it's getting hotter. We have the internal emails by Professor Jones, the head of the UN program, saying, how do we hide the decline in temperatures? How do we hide that carbon dioxide comes after warming? We have the head of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, Van Rompuy, the head of the EU, saying global governance by this private group of banks, this new carbon scheme will be a new derivatives to fund world government. So I wanted to get Webster on to talk about this. Then before he leaves us, the dollar plunging, what happened in Dubai, the global dollar crisis, what that means to the average person, why gold is up at $1,200 an ounce, cresting right now, where all this is going. I can't think of a better political mind who's been more spot on. This guy is a literal brainiac, a Leonardo da Vinci type, and we're always honored to have Webster Griffin Tarpley on with us. Webster, good to have you.
Thank you, Alex. Happy Thanksgiving.
I hope you had a good Thanksgiving there in D.C.
Indeed.
Now, again, in Obama Deception to Follow the Republic, you explain this is the greatest scientific fraud after the Nazis, and the two tie together for those that don't know. Give us in 5 minutes a boil down of this global cult, this carbon credit, carbon tax cult, and this latest climate gate situation and how big this victory is.
Well, I think it's a turning point in the intellectual and political history of the world in this sense. Back in the 1920s and 1930s, there was a consensus among large numbers of pseudoscientists, quackademics, and charlatans, but many of them had university professorships, that there was inferiority of the races, that some races were inferior, others were superior. They tried to talk about, phrenology, measuring the size of the brain and all sorts of other nonsense. And they came up with this pseudoscience, which was widely considered to be legitimate at the time. And remember, I think this is the moment we've just had. It's like the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, when Jesse Owens won all those gold medals and Hitler was sitting in the stands fuming because it meant that his crazy theory had been completely defeated. And
the other black boxer also knocked out the German boxer.
Yes, it was Max Schmeling was defeated by Joe Louis, I guess it was, right? So this was bad for these racists and their crackpot race science theories. So now what we have is absolutely conclusive evidence of an international conspiracy. My God, it's a conspiracy. There's no doubt. We have the proofs of a conspiracy. These people are, again, they're quackademics, they're charlatans, they're pseudoscientists. A lot of them belong to this hoked-up specialty called climatology, which really did not exist until the 1990s and the coming of Al Gore. You got to remember, Al Gore systematically purged the United States government of anybody who was not a quack, anybody who stood up and said, well, your ozone story is not holding water, it's ridiculous, and your other acid rain, and then indeed this ozone layer business. And
let's not forget, you're going to get into this whole eugenics movement that ran Hitler out of the Britain and U.S., this is their progeny. This whole global warming movement is a eugenical system, so it's the same crew.
Indeed, and the goal of this stuff is indeed genocide. I've just seen a couple of interesting dispatches from the Chinese news agency Xinhua, New China, where they say there's a hidden agenda in the attempts of rich Western countries to impose carbon limits on the developing world, and that is, of course, to strangle their development. And it basically comes down to this. If you look at the U.S. export price of wheat, corn, and a couple of other things, but mainly wheat and corn, that is what basically determines the level of the world market. And the U.S., of course, has been able to produce these things very efficiently in past years. If you ever got this monstrous cap-and-trade, cap-and-tax bill that Senator Boxer has been pushing, and also Waxman over in his committee, if that ever went through, the minimum effect would be to double the export price of U.S. wheat and corn into sub-Saharan Africa, on the wheat, South Asia, and then all sorts of poor places in Latin America where they depend on U.S. corn for the tortillas. We know from the FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization in Rome, that there are about 1 billion people in these places that I've just mentioned who are on the verge of starvation. If you put through the cap and tax and you double the U.S. export price, at least, as minimum, you will kill several hundred million of that billion who are right now on the edge of starvation. So this is ultra-Hitlerian genocide dressed up as green ideology, concern for the polar bears, concerned about ice caps and glaciers.
And by the way, that's not your opinion. Maurice Strong of the UN states they want a neo-feudalistic system to destroy industrial capacity, and your historical doctorate is in the Venetians. Is this feudalistic model not basically a replay of your own studies?
Well, it's the mentality of the Venetians. I mean, it's the mentality of the Venetians in this sense. Back in the late 1200s and early 1300s, the Venetians and the Genoese and certain other banking centers were lending money to the crowned heads of Europe, and they were imposing levels of interest, usury, that forced the kings and the rulers to increase the tax burden, the take, so to speak, on the peasantry of Europe, so that the peasants got less and less to eat, and that meant that they were visited by malnutrition and all kinds of diseases that accompany with that, so that by the time the contagion arrived, presumably from the Far East, of the Black Death, there were no natural defenses left, and the epidemic had free reign. Now, that killed about a third of the population of Europe. So we can see that these ghouls, these monsters that are gathering in Copenhagen hope that they can do the same thing. Now, just a couple of things. I think it's time to start demanding a special prosecutor. If we ever needed a special prosecutor, it's now. And you can see of the people that participate in these emails, we have people at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. So NASA Goddard is one place that's got to be investigated.
And again, this is all the three groups used by the UN for the core data that everyone else signs on to and agrees in their own emails, admitting this is premeditated fraud, and they know the Earth is cooling.
Yes, and they're talking about they want to fake the dates on emails. They use tactics of Joe McCarthy. They want to destroy the reputations of scientists. There's indeed one email where they threaten violence. They say the next time I see him, I'm going to punch him in the nose. And who knows what that means? That might be serious.
And they talk about hiding the decline and blocking FOIA requests for the raw data.
Right, and then they talk about also learned journals, right, the so-called peer-reviewed journals. If there's a peer-reviewed learned journal that publishes material that doesn't go along with this insane party line of these lunatics, then they say we want to demote them so they'll no longer be considered a learned journal, and we can go ahead. So NASA Goddard has got to be investigated.
Stay there. We'll go through the other criminals caught with their own emails and the computer code written into it, fraud. Computer programmer notes, this is fraudulent. Here's how you hide the decline. We have them red-handed. Senator Inhofe's calling for criminal charges, Lord Monckton and many others. We'll get Webster, Griffin, Tarpley's take on this in the final segment. You don't want to miss this.